During the last year, the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists have been visiting the state's rock art sites to create contemporary images of ancient visual symbols. I'm Barbara Cohenauer. Stay tuned for Focus on Art. Focus on Art has visited many galleries to look at visual images, obviously through the years, but this is our most unique one. It's a little bit harder for me to perhaps get to the art, but I'm delighted to be here. Our guest today is Gary Moeller. Gary, welcome once again to Focus on Art.
Nice to be here, Barbara.
Appreciate your being here as always.
Thank you.
Gary, let's talk a little bit about why this group of artists is way out in the country, climbing mountains to look at visual images, and what are you seeing here?
Well, for the past 10 or 12 years, the Rogers State College Art Department's been working with something called rock art. And on these walls of this shelter here, which is a outcropping, a sandstone outcropping, people that were here long before we were put examples of both red and black pictographs, drawings or paintings on rock. Well, we always thought that was very interesting when we came across it in our studies. And then we, over the years, we've obtained grants and special projects from different state and federal agencies to continue work, either taking students out from high schools or colleges to look at the work, basically to show them what's out there, a better appreciation of it, less chance of it being destroyed because of that education, which is always the main thing about education. People appreciate things better.
Right.
And then recently, we were given a grant from the Oklahoma Arts Council, to do a brochure of work that we, as artists, the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists, these people working around the hill here today, are doing of these different rock art sites and the rock art themselves.
Okay.
And then from there, we're doing museum shows in the area, and then that show will travel throughout Oklahoma and hopefully the western part of the United States.
Okay, now right now we're under a rock shelter, and this would have been a place that people would have chosen to reside because it provides some safety from the elements, that kind of thing?
I'd say so. I don't know in terms of how much actual inhabitants over a long period of time groups would stay here. I don't know. It's a little hard to say, but the fact of the matter is many people over many centuries use this as a facility for protection against the elements, and probably also as a vantage point to look across the valley down to creeks and so forth down in the lower area. There's pasture there, and as you can see, it's rather dense right now, but it may not always have been that dense. And up on top of this rock as well, they could have looked around and seen game moving along the creek bank, which was probably commonplace, and then they could go down and hunt those things and have a good vantage point and a good place to stay out of the wind. See, this place is facing south and east, so we get most of the heat, as you can feel, in the wintertime or in the late fall. So it's a very good place for that. And then also our storms around this area usually come from the west or from the northwest, and so it's also very good for that. And of course, also it's hidden, very hidden, and if you didn't know where it was, you probably couldn't find it.
Is the reason that you can find these visual images in places like this because they are so remote? Would there have been an equal number of visual images in places that are very much inhabited by man today that have simply been destroyed because people came in contact with them?
That's happened. That's happened a lot. Now, a lot of this work is protected because it's underneath a rock shelter. The elements are not getting to it. You have to remember that these things were done with relatively primitive materials, with not a lot of thought about the chemistry of those materials, and so therefore it needed some protection. And so it's out of the sun, so it doesn't bleach out as much, although there's some pieces here that are kind of hard to see. Out of most of the water and moisture. These boulders and so forth, rocks that we have down on the talus slope, this area below the rock art site, are exposed to all those elements, and therefore they wouldn't hold any rock art if any rock art was put on them. There's something called a petroglyph, which is actually scratched into the rock, which might be seen and often is seen in a talus slope or along a boulder, or along a creek, for instance. But as far as the paintings or drawings, you seldom, if ever, see them out in the open because they'll usually be destroyed either through sunlight or rain or something of that nature.
Okay, and what we're going to look at here today really is more rock drawing than rock painting. Is that right?
I think so. Now, there's some, in one of the pieces, there's some indication that there was some, maybe a binder or some sort of vehicle involved. We have one piece that's kind of a dark piece that probably was put together using redbud charcoal, some of this iron oxide that I'm going to show you, some sort of binder, oil, fat, blood, something of that nature.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at one of these images.
Okay. All right, over here we have a little image that is approximately 6 inches in length. This is what's known as a therianthrope, Barbara. This is a figure that is probably painted on. We were describing a minute ago about the painting possibility of a binder used. And the therianthrope, as a term for a particular image, means it's probably not an animal, it's probably not a man. It may be some sort of fantasy figure of some sort, but we're not exactly sure. It looks to be some sort of quadrupedal kind of thing with 4 limbs, but it's got the head of some sort of insect.
Right.
So it's a very interesting figure.
Gary, what time in history do you think this figure was created?
Well, it'd be major guess and speculation on putting a chronological age on it. If you want to just know my guess, it's probably done some time before 1500. And the reason I'm saying that is because there's no depictions of horses or anything like that around here, and not even any depictions of bows and arrows.
Okay.
That's as close as I can get.
Well, that certainly puts it back in time and space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we have another really nice image on this particular face too. Is that right?
Well, unfortunately, Barbara, to our modern eyes, some of these images that were put on here centuries ago are pretty much gone. But at times, we can make out at least some hint of what was originally there. And so some of it's speculation, and some of it's educated guess, and some of it's just the old artistic eye following us along. But hopefully, if I use mine properly here, I can make out the image of a person that I believe is a person on top of a buffalo, and it's very, very difficult to see, but if you follow the line of my finger, you might be able to make it out. We're looking at a person here, sitting on the hump in front of behind the hump of a buffalo. The horns are right here. This is the head of the buffalo, and it goes down to a set of front feet and hooves, and then if you follow the line, you can also see indications of other legs and hooves, and then even an indication of a tail. So it wasn't uncommon for people to actually jump on the buffalo to bring them down when they were hunting them, even without horses. There's a possibility that there might be other buffalo depicted here, but it's so faded because of the leaching of chemistry through the walls and also mud daubers and things of that nature that it's very much obscured.
You kind of get just almost a little spot here.
Yeah, just a
that
whole
might be
series.
a little group of buffalo behind.
And I can imagine also the thought of maybe showing this one buffalo taken out of the herd, so to speak, steered out of the herd so it could be singled out to be slaughtered.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of speculation there, but it, certainly follows the prehistory.
Right.
Also, if we follow down, we'll notice some interesting things. We go from what's kind of a gray or black area of color into a red that was also applied, and has no real distinction as anything formal that I can tell. But if we continue over, we'll see another black figure that is rather nice if, again, we kind of follow the shape of it, the outline of it. So we have the head of a figure, an anthropomorphic figure, a human figure, arms on each side, and then a stretched out body that probably ends up somewhere down in here. But again, that's an anthropomorphic displayed figure of a human. And there's some other associated figures that fall down below this that might also be other indications of human figures as well. And this a random variety of different kinds of red pigment, which is iron oxide that you can find down right below our feet. Just examples of iron oxide everywhere. Some of the drip lines from off the water coming off the top of the bluff will fall down and show you some very bright red images of pigment, and you can just take that pigment and just draw on it just like they did. So I believe some of this red stuff was just drawn directly on there, whereas the black may have been actually painted.
Okay, well, let's go to one of those drip lines and take a look at that pigment.
Okay. Barbara, this is what's known as a drip line. This is water coming off the top of the shelter, falling down onto the shelter floor, and washing away the dirt and debris that's on top to expose some of the artifactual information that the people who inhabited this area left here centuries ago. So what we're seeing down here is pieces of the pigment that the artist actually used. This is iron oxide, mostly iron impregnated rock. And
Did you scratch that on there?
It works rather well. It makes a nice red-brown color, very similar to what you'll see on the walls of the caves around here and the rock shelters. Then we see a number of flint chips, all different types. This is kind of a marbled flint chip. Some of them are pink. If you look closely here, we might even find a little artifact itself.
Oh, that's a little arrowhead.
Yep, it's a little tip of some sort of weapon, projectile, small points. It's interesting to know that some of the smallest points have been theorized to be some of the implements that used to kill the largest and the toughest kind of beast, because it would penetrate the hide more cleanly than a bigger projectile. We even see down in here little bones from different little animals from around here that probably are not necessarily ancient, but many, many different types of pebbles and so forth, revealing flint chips, another tip of an arrowhead here.
Well, now, Gary, is this the place an archaeologist would look first, is right along the drip line?
To find out if this was inhabited, yes. It would be a good idea. You wouldn't learn much from this other than just the fact that there was a lot of people, a lot of inhabitants here over centuries probably, finding the implements that were used and and if he knew his stuff, he could probably tell even where some of the flint came from. But as far as any kind of information about who was here and so forth, he would have to put down he or she would have to put down a test pit, dig down away from all this rambled up stuff here that had been stirred up over the centuries, and dig down below it all and see what's in the rock and see how deep it goes and try to tell the age and cultural information from there.
Okay. Now, you do have some things over here on the rock that some of your students have picked up while they've been up here working, and some of the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists people.
Yeah, these are just some good examples of various chips and so forth of flint to show that this was a very heavily occupied area. Here's looks like the shaft of a knife or something. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it certainly looks to be. You can see it's worked on both sides. Mm-hmm. There's a number of other pieces down here that would fall. Here's maybe the tip of a knife, probably. You can see that that might be the tip of a knife. So there's all types of information there that would probably identify different peoples who traded for different flints throughout this country, and they probably sat around here on a sunny afternoon like this and chipped away, what they call flint napping, and they could make some pretty fancy knives and points in very short order. And so it was not too terrible to shoot these things at things and lose them, so they could make them pretty fast.
I see.
They have a little pack maybe, or a little sack, a leather packet of different pieces of flint that they could nap out in the woods if they needed to.
Well, Gary, it's these artifacts, the images on the wall of the overhang here, and then, of course, the beautiful landscape that have really been the inspiration for this series of paintings by the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists.
That's right.
Okay, and you brought a number of your fellow artists out here today, and I'm going to get out and walk around, meet those guys, and find out what they're doing, and we'll be back to see you a little bit later.
I think I'll do a little drawing of my own while you're doing that, if that's okay.
Okay, good. We'd like for you to get a little work done, too.
Right.
The president of the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists is Jody Ellison. Hi, Jody.
Hi, Barbara.
Welcome to Focus on Art.
Well, thank you. This is great.
We appreciate an opportunity to kind of intrude into your work and get out here and see you actually executing these beautiful paintings outside.
Thank you. We had, as I said, just started, so I hope there's enough there that you can tell something about what we're trying to do.
Well, I can certainly see the images beginning to evolve. Now, you are an impressionist, so
Yes.
that means you paint mostly outside.
We do. We paint on location.
Okay, and the technique right now is very loose, and it's going to stay that way, probably.
Well, I hope so. This is a new project for us. We're normally painting gardens and flowers, and so this is a very interesting project, but fun. We've enjoyed it.
Good.
So,
Kind of broaden some of your artistic
does.
appreciation.
it
for
does. When we
older
first started
things.
this, we thought, what are we going to paint? And then it ended up that we found lots of things to paint. So it's been great.
How many finished paintings are you going to have from this project, Jody?
I think we have 39 for our show at the Cowboy Hall of Fame and Gilcrease. So
Wonderful.
Each one of us will have 4 or 5 paintings.
Okay, I think it's really an interesting project to take a very contemporary painting style and apply that to some very old images. Gary was saying that one of the figures up there he thought was maybe before 1500, so.
Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
The more that we learn about this project, you know, the more interesting it gets. And I hope it'll be that way with the public, and that they can enjoy some of the sights that they would not get to see if it weren't for us putting them down on canvas and paper. And
Right. Well, now I know Gary has taken you ladies and taken you up the hills and through the valleys.
Yes, we have. We've become pioneer women and men, and it's been fun. We've had snakes and ticks, but we've gone to the source.
All right.
So,
Wonderful. Now, how many members are there in the Oklahoma
We have
Society of
10.
Impressionists?
10 now.
Okay, and they didn't all get out today, so we're just
No.
going to visit with the ones that are here.
Good, thank you. We've had some people that are sick and were supposed to come, but didn't make it today. So
Okay.
we're just happy to be here for this beautiful day in December.
I know it's hard to imagine that we had snow on the ground 3 days ago.
I know, it's wonderful.
I think that's part of Oklahoma. If you don't like the weather, you stay
Just
around
wait,
for a while.
Wait 10 minutes.
Okay, well now we're going to head on down to our next artist. Who do we have to see next right down
I
here?
believe Claudia Doyle is right down the hill.
Hi Claudia, welcome to Focus on Art.
Hi Barbara, nice to be here.
Nice to be out in the woods with you all today. Another wonderful painting underway here by another Impressionist artist.
Well, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your experience here with this particular project.
Oh, well, we started this a long time ago with Gary, and I have to admit when I first heard of the project, I wasn't really all that enthused. I thought I couldn't think what I would paint. You know, he started talking about pictographs and petroglyphs, and we were all going, well, what will we paint? And he said, well, the landscapes are beautiful. Everything around them is beautiful. They always lived at very nice places where there's a stream, the cliffs, the views. And I have to admit, after this, I did one landscape and the whole thing, which is up at the top of the hill. I got so into it with Gary and got so fascinated that I went and got books and started reading, and it's really opened up a whole new interest
Wonderful.
area.
Great, okay. So you have a real kinship now with a few early American artists.
Very early American artists, yes.
Okay, well this is a wonderful place to look at finished framed paintings.
You want to just hold that, or shall we? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just hold it for you. This is
Okay,
one
this
that
is-
you have done.
This is the one landscape that I did, and it's called Coronado's View. And where I was standing was at Coronado Rock, which is on Black Mesa. Back up here, this is the view out, which looks very atypical for Oklahoma, obviously, but the repetition of these mesas as they descend has a real significance for me now, because on that rock there was graffiti, and it started in like 1940, 1930s. Then it dropped back to the 1800s. People, obviously the settlers coming west. Then there was a gap. There was nothing from like 1700 until 16, Gary may be able to verify this, I don't remember what it was, 16 something, was Coronado's name in Italian on this rock. And they say that they find these markings all over like Kansas, and his men, he had some Italian soldiers with him on the route. Well, this, for the first time, I guess the pictographs were so far away and so distant that they were an abstraction to me. But once I got there and saw Coronado in 1600, you know, and it got up to numbers that were accessible,
Right.
then it all of a sudden became clear what what we were really doing was history, and it was like their early graffiti, but they couldn't. They were prehistory, so they had no written ability, and this was the way they left their mark, the same way that Coronado did. So that's why this has such a significance for me. It's like those descending. It's like peeling away layers of
Right.
history, and of course, what's closest to you is always the most in focus.
All right. Wonderful meaning. Of course, it's a beautiful painting.
Thank you.
All right. I know that as viewers get out to see your two shows that you have coming up, one at the Cowboy Hall of Fame and one at Gilcrease, they'll really enjoy all of the paintings, and of course they'll particularly like the special meaning this one has for you.
Well, I hope so.
Okay, well, you've got a great painting underway today, and what you probably need for me to do is to go on to the next artist and let you get back to work.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, here's another fine Impressionist painting underway by Carla Perry. Hi, Carla. Welcome to Focus on Art. Appreciate being able to kind of intrude in your work today.
Well, I think I'm about finished anyway, and it's about time to go, so it's okay.
Good. Well, you have one painting over here that's all finished and framed.
Right.
Why don't we take a look at that one?
Okay.
How many are you going to have in the show?
I'll have 4.
Oh, this is beautiful. I think
Thank you.
a good example of the fact that Impressionist painters really love color. And you have some wonderful color there. It's also very structural, big broad brush strokes.
I love that cave. That was over not far from where I live at Sand Springs.
Okay.
And there were, I don't know if they show or not, but the drawings right here, there was a horse and some figures under there. It's amazing that those things are still around after all these years.
Well, it's amazing how naturally they fit into the setting. You know, they're kind of man-made, but maybe it's because of their age or just because of that real kinship that early Americans seem to have with nature that makes them such a beautiful part of the overall cave there. I've been in that cave, and it is a beautiful
You have to walk
cave.
through the brambles to get to it, don't you?
Absolutely. That was one of those days that Gary drug you girls through the countryside.
But it's beautiful there. And it's good that it's all grown up like that, because everybody doesn't go. It's too hard to get to.
Right.
So maybe they'll last a while longer.
Well, I hope so. At least they're going to last a while longer in this beautiful image that you've created to kind of capture and save that little bit of history for us.
Well, thank you.
Has this been an exciting project for you?
We've really enjoyed it. We've got to travel all over Oklahoma, out to Black Mesa, which I didn't even know existed.
Okay, great.
And all those rocks are just covered with etched drawings and the red, whatever that is.
The red ochre?
Drawings too. And they're on private property, so most of them will be preserved because you have to get permits to go in there.
I see.
So that was fun.
Well, great. I appreciate your being here for Focus on Art.
Well, thank you.
And good luck on your upcoming 2 shows.
Okay, thank you.
The last of these Impressionists is a good friend of mine, Wanda Brown. Wanda, welcome once again to Focus on Art.
Hi, Barbara.
It's always a pleasure to have you. I might tell those of you at home that Wanda's been a guest all by herself, and we did a wonderful show with Wanda, so we're glad to see you again today.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'd rather be out here.
Absolutely. Isn't this a gorgeous day?
I love it.
And it's December.
I know.
That's one nice thing about living in Oklahoma, is that you have wonderful weather all year long. Wonderful painting, Wanda. Love the colors.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your technique here.
Well, it's hard to say because I only paint sort of how I feel. And standing here, I can look up and see the warmth of the light coming up under the rocks where the Indians have lived. And then I start feeling, you know, that maybe they felt when they lived here, and the warmth of the sun, and yet being out in nature and the beauty of the moss on the rocks. And I don't know, it's just all a combination of many things.
Well, I think that when we look at your finished paintings, we get that feeling of your real emotional involvement with the landscape. I think that's particularly special. How many of these paintings have you done that are going to be in this exhibit?
I have 4 in this exhibit.
Great.
Several small studies. We go out like this, and this is the real fun part.
Well, now, would you take this small study home, maybe to your studio, and then do a larger painting of the same subject?
Sometimes I do that. Sometimes this study may be all I have to say about the subject.
Okay.
And then if we do need to have larger paintings, many times I will come back to the same spot several times. And it just depends on the timing and the weather
Okay.
and what I might do.
And of course, this is one of the easier spots to get to.
True.
I understand
true.
Gary has really walked you ladies through the woods and up the hills.
Oh, we have to be mountain goats.
Okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you is I wanted to get just an idea about your feeling about this project overall, your relationship with the rock art and so forth.
Well, this is one of the most exciting things because many people in Oklahoma paint Indians and Indian things, but yet we have really gone out to where this is prehistory. None of this is really recorded. And I like it better. I'm very excited about it, and I've learned a lot.
Great. Well, it's a wonderful project.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your being here for Focus on Art.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Well, we're back here where we started with Gary Moeller again, and we're going to take a quick look here at some of Gary's finished paintings. Gary, this is wonderful.
Thank you.
Where did you do this particular painting?
Out of my mind. I just did it completely out of my mind. No, I actually, it was an image from a place I'd visited called Crawford's Cave, not too far from this place right here, just a few miles. And I didn't actually use any slides or photographs, but just my years of memory of going to this place.
Okay.
And it's kind of an unusual painting because it started out as a watercolor and ended up as an oil painting. So I first started out as a watercolor on paper and then worked some different materials over it in a certain process and started working oil paint on top of that.
Okay, so it would be better known as mixed media.
Yes, mixed media is what it is.
Okay, and all of that wonderful color, once again, that's so typical of the Impressionist style.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got some more down here. Can I
Okay.
take this one for you?
Yeah, please.
Thanks.
These next two paintings will be watercolors. They're under a little plexiglass here, so you might get some reflection as you're looking at it, but basically this one's not close at all. This one's from an area out Black Mesa in the panhandle of Oklahoma,
Okay.
right on the Colorado border. And the images are of petroglyphs.
All these little
Right.
small images right through this area.
Some are recognizable as desert sheep and maybe figures of people and so forth. Others are just total fantasy and possibly just kind of sketching around, or maybe even some, I don't know, some spiritual things.
Wonderful. And one more.
And this is also a watercolor. This is a site near Sand Springs, Oklahoma. And this is a pictographic image drawn on.
Well, Gary, these are great. We appreciate being here. It looks like it's going to be a wonderful show. For those of you at home, we appreciate your being with us, as always, for Focus on Art. We'll look forward to having you back next time.